Quarterbacks are always going to be the hot topic. Every single draft, I think, for Pittsburgh Steelers fans, you have a little bit more of a interest in it this year with Ben Roethlisberger retiring. Just overall, the quarterback draft class, how has it changed or not changed since the combine up to this point with pro days almost being over?
See, I think it's a really interesting class that's kind of getting a bad rap, to be honest with you. I mean, there's not an Andrew Luck, there's not a Trevor Lawrence. It's going to be the first pick overall in any draft that they come out. But people forget, Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, those guys were not super early picks and had massive questions surrounding them when they came out of school. I mean, some of them small schools, unorthodox quarterbacks. I'm not sure that those guys who are massive successes, MVP types, had fewer holes in their game at the same stage as some of these quarterbacks. And each one of these guys, and I think there's 5 of them, maybe Carson Strong makes 6, but he's a certain type, are future starters to some degree. That doesn't mean they're all going to be successes, and they each have a major question. But so did Josh Allen. He had major accuracy issues. Lamar Jackson's style of play was very different. Mahomes was a wild card in terms of risk takers. So I think it's not as terrible a group as everybody makes it out to be.
Do you think anything has changed in terms of maybe how teams would be ranking them at this point because of pro days?
Maybe, and I'm not dancing around the question, but I'm really having a tough time getting a real barometer of what the league thinks of this group. I mean, how early can these guys go? Because there's not as many landing spots as there usually is. And part of that's because 5 of them went in the top 15 last year. So a lot of the teams, the Jets, the Patriots, they have their young guy to build around. There was a ton of quarterback movement, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, of course, that filled holes immediately. So the musical chairs aren't quite as open as usual. And there's several teams in the Steelers boat that have guys, but could use a guy, but don't have to.
How do you see it playing out in terms of how many would potentially go in the first round?
I would put the over-under at 3 and maybe even 4, because I think what's going to happen is Pickett and Willis will go reasonably early, maybe before the Steelers even have a shot at either at 20. And I think it gets really interesting. I mentioned Lamar Jackson earlier. Lamar Jackson was a very late first-round pick by a team coming up from the second round to get in the first round to get that 5th-year option, which is the real value of these guys. So I think the Ritters, the Howes, Corral, I think they're going to get really hot and exciting near the end of the first round, maybe for teams that passed on them early to get back in. And that's a big key, and it's also a big Steeler key, is if you can have quality, it doesn't have to be superstar, quarterback play for 5 cost control years. I always use the Javon Hargrave example that the Steelers would never have lost Javon Hargrave or Matt Filer, because the quarterback is such a cost controlled entity there on a rookie deal.